Shit, what's up, chat? What's up, man? What is up? Starting off early here, rolling the gas, same old stuff. Playing some chess in a little bit, don't you worry. I'm ready to go today. No dumb mistakes, alright? No blunders. No blunders, okay? No blunders, alright? Alright, seriously, let's lock in. Rolling up, honestly really shouldn't be. I'm fucking tired. Fucking tired. Shouldn't be rolling up, but I absolutely am. Um, Making sure it looks alright. Yeah, I'm fucking tired. I can't even lie to you guys. Fucking exhausted. Worked all day. Got a few hours to do this. Just a few hours to do this, and it's on to my on with my day, I guess. I had to get a couple games of chess in, a couple good games. As long as I had some time, I could have napped. I could have probably could have done something else, but hey. Oh damn, I forgot. I got a fucking Orochi Madoodle here. If I get bored, I'll smoke that, I guess. I don't know. I won't throw that out just yet. I mean, it's literally a roach. Like, it's a little bit bigger than like a roach you would like just throw out, but definitely still grounds for it. So I don't know if I'm gonna spark it just yet. Um, I guess we could listen to some Kanye. That's something I like to do, right? Been a little couple weeks or like a week or two or something since I streamed, I think. Oh yeah, actually I wanted to listen to this. This was
saw their
nuts.
towns and food.
Need a UGC video for your business?
Hearing
Find me
about
and many
these
other skilled
stories are
creators on
crazy,
Fiverr.
bro. If
Or
you're
you
American, you need
reduced
to know
to
about
ashes.
this stuff.
The number of
At Fiverr, we know your
Fucking
mom tells
Christ,
you you're
enough
amazing.
with the ads,
And she's
dude.
probably right. But recruiters are not your mom. So when you're getting ready to land your dream,
My Lai Massacre. On the 16th of March 1968, in the Vietnamese village called Sun Mai, U.S. soldiers carried out what became the largest massacre of civilians by American forces in the 20th century. Between 347 and 504 unarmed villagers, most of them women, children, and the elderly, were killed. Many women and
Damn.
girls, some as young as 12, were raped before being murdered. Bodies were
Damn.
mutilated, homes were burned, and livestock was slaughtered. Witnesses described women using their bodies to shield children, only for soldiers to fire into them. One ditch alone held more than 70 dead. Then, platoons went hut to hut, killing entire families, bayoneting the wounded, and throwing grenades. Soldiers later testified that their orders had been to destroy everything, leave nothing, and treat anyone still there as the enemy. One soldier intentionally shot himself in the foot to avoid taking part. A few, like Michael Bernhardt, refused to kill and later helped expose what happened. The massacre might have been even worse if not for Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr. and his helicopter crew. Flying low over the village, they
There's
saw
like some
women and
books about
children
this
being
guy,
slaughtered,
so-
and at one point, Thompson landed between U.S. soldiers and terrified civilians, ordering his own gunners to fire on Americans if they kept killing. He personally evacuated survivors by helicopter, saving dozens. At first, the massacre was reported as a great victory, claiming that 128 Viet Cong were killed, and the unit was congratulated. Officers up the chain of command worked to hide the truth, but later on, when veterans like Ronald Reidenhauer spoke out and journalist Seymour Hersh investigated, the world learned the real story. When photographs surfaced showing women, children, and babies piled in ditches, what happened
Damn.
could no longer be denied. In the end, 26 soldiers were charged.
Alright, y'all tell me if I'm fucking insane for this, crazy, psychotic, or whatever the fuck, sociopathic, whatever. Like, I'm not with the censoring. Like, I mean, if it's too much for you, look away. But like, I wish they like would actually show these things, cause it's like, nigga, at some point they were like, the reason why, like, at least when I grew up, this is what they told me in school, but the reason why like Vietnam was so fucking such like an eye opener and shit was cause like that was when TV kind of first started being a thing, and like the battles apparently were like shown on TV. So like people were seeing it like, I'm not sure if I support this. Little girls getting raped before getting killed. Yeah, not sure I want my 13-year-old looking to join the military one day. You know? I'm pretty sure that was the whole, not controversy around Vietnam, but the whole like kind of reconstruction of how media works as far as like just showing this stuff. That's why you have journalists. They don't fucking put it on TV. Like that one bitch that died in Israel, Rachel Coring, I think. She like stood in front of a boulder that Israelis were like destroying like a fucking. Rachel Corey, yeah. Yeah, she like stood in front of a fucking like an Israeli tank, and they fucking said, yeah, okay, goyim. Okay, goy, you want to die this way? You want to go out for your folks? And yeah, that was crazy. But yeah, like Israel's one of them places where you're not about to be no journalist covering like the shit that that they don't like to broadcast. You know what I mean? They will kill you. They will find you and kill you. Damn, stock took a hit today. May need to buy something. Might need to buy something as the stock is taking a hit today. Um. Um. Uh. What time is it? So I think market closed at like 4. I think I got a little bit of time. We'll see though. We'll see if it takes it like tomorrow. I don't know if I'll buy some. I like slowly invest in the market. Like I don't day trade and go for broke and take out and put here and all that. I just kind of go with the S&Ps. Advice from one of my homies. But yeah, that's typically like my strategy when it comes to investing in the stocks. Just like slow growing shit. Quantum physics, computers, things of that sort. The companies that make the chips for that, Nvidia. Companies like that include that. You know. We'll keep listening though, then I'll get a chess game going.
But only one, Lieutenant Calley, was convicted. He was found guilty of murdering 22 villagers and sentenced to life in prison, but he served 3.5 years under house arrest after President Nixon intervened. Medina, accused of giving the orders, was acquitted. Most others escaped punishment. Survivors, many of them children at the time, carried the trauma for decades. One recalled, "Everyone in my family was killed. They threw me into a ditch full of dead bodies. I was covered with blood and brains."
Damn.
Haditha Massacre. On the morning of November 19th, 2005,
I didn't burn out because I was working too hard. I burnt out because I kept hearing no. Here's what my day looked like. 2 hours researching one company.
in the Iraqi town of Haditha, a roadside bomb tore through a U.S. Marine convoy. The explosion killed a Marine instantly and left 2 other Marines badly wounded. Within hours, in the Iraqi town of Haditha, a roadside bomb tore through a U.S. Marine convoy. The explosion killed a Marine instantly and left 2 other Marines badly wounded. Within hours, that turned into one of the darkest chapters of the Iraq War. The Marines shot 5 unarmed men who had been ordered out of their taxi, killing them on the spot. Then, they entered nearby houses. Inside were families with grandparents, parents, and children as young as 1 year old. Nonetheless, 19 civilians were killed in their homes, most shot at close range in the chest or head. By the end of the day, 25 unarmed civilians were dead, with the youngest victim being just 3 years old. The Marine Corps' first official story was false. They claimed that 15 civilians had been killed by the roadside bomb, and that 8 insurgents died in a firefight afterward. However, an Iraqi human rights worker filmed the aftermath: bullet holes in walls, bloodstains on floors, and bodies of women and children with gunshot wounds. A Time magazine reporter then began investigating and found that doctors at the local hospital confirmed that none of the bodies showed bomb injuries, but close-range gunshot wounds. A 9-year-old girl who survived said she saw her grandfather shot first in the chest and then in the head, followed by her grandmother. Investigations stretched on for years, and at first, 8 Marines were charged, but case after case collapsed. Some Marines received immunity in exchange for testimony, while others had their charges dropped. By 2008, nearly all charges were gone, and the only Marine punished was Vuteric. He admitted to negligent dereliction of duty, lost rank and pay, but avoided jail. For many Iraqis, this outcome was unbearable, as families who had lost multiple relatives in one morning saw 6 years of U.S. military prosecution end without a single Marine imprisoned. Survivors called it an assault on humanity. Lawyers for the victims urged international courts to take up the case. Meanwhile, the U.S. military paid $38,000 in compensation to some families. Samar Campaign. Kill everyone over the age of 10. Those were the words of General Jacob H. Smith during the Philippine-American War in what became known as the pacification of Samar. His order did not apply only to armed enemy fighters, but to everyone, as he wanted to turn the island into, in his own words, a howling wilderness. The situation leading up to this was already tense, as just months earlier, Filipino fighters together with local townspeople had carried out the Balangiga massacre, where in a surprise attack, they killed 54 and wounded 18 U.S. soldiers. That's when the U.S. government sent General Smith to Samar, who made it clear that he wanted no prisoners and asked for everyone capable of bearing arms to be killed. When Marines asked him what exactly capable of bearing arms meant, Smith explained that it meant boys as young as 10 years old. Waller himself, the major leading these Marines, partly resisted these instructions, telling some of his officers not to target women and children. Still, over just 11 days, he reported that his men burned 255 homes and killed 39 people. Civilians saw their towns and food reduced to ashes. The number of deaths will never be fully known, but broader estimates suggest around 2,000 to 2,500 civilians were killed. The campaign became infamous in the United States once reports reached home, and Smith was put on trial in May 1902, but not for murder or war crimes. Instead, he was found guilty only of conduct to the prejudice of good order and military discipline, a minor charge. His punishment was just a formal reprimand. To calm public anger, he was quietly forced into retirement. Waller himself was also later put on trial for ordering the execution of Filipino porters, but he was acquitted. Nisar Square Massacre. This one was different from the others. It happened without warning, and not by the regular U.S. Army, but by a private contractor known as Blackwater, which made it even more controversial. On a normal morning in September 2007, a Blackwater convoy drove into Nisar Square in Baghdad to clear a route for U.S. officials. Moments later, though, out of nowhere, they opened fire on Iraqi civilians. 17 people were killed, and 20 more were wounded. Some were shot while still sitting in their cars. For example, witnesses described one small Kia with a mother and her adult son inside. The son was shot in the head, and the car kept moving forward and was riddled with more bullets before a grenade set it on fire. Blackwater claimed the convoy had been ambushed and that the guards fired in self-defense, but the Iraqi government called it an unprovoked attack. The State Department admitted that innocent people had been killed, and Iraq suspended Blackwater's license to operate in its territory and demanded accountability. Several investigations began, and a U.S. military report supported Iraq's version of events, saying Blackwater was at fault. The FBI concluded that at least 14 of the 17 people killed had been shot without justification. Some Blackwater guards themselves told investigators that the shooting was wrong. One guard even kept firing after others shouted for him to stop, until another contractor aimed his weapon at him to force him to stand down. The massacre raised questions about the role of private military contractors, and Iraq demanded punishment for Blackwater and pressed for compensation. In the U.S., the House passed a bill to bring contractors under U.S. criminal law in war zones, though the Senate did not vote on it. Then, the State Department told Blackwater its security contract would not be renewed, and years later, the case reached U.S. courts. In 2014, 4 Blackwater guards were convicted in federal court. One of them was sentenced to life in prison, while the others received 30 years each under firearms laws. There were some appeals, but in the end, the man originally sentenced to life was once again given life in prison, while the other 3 had their sentences reduced to about half of what they were before. Later on, however, there was a final twist. In December 2020, President Donald Trump pardoned all 4 men. The decision triggered outrage in Iraq and harsh criticism from United Nations experts, who said the pardons violated U.S. obligations under international law. Abu Ghraib. The photos from Abu Ghraib are widely known around the world for how disturbing they look, but the background is even darker. To the public, Abu Ghraib was a normal detention and interrogation facility, but it wasn't at all. Inside, there was sexual humiliation to lengths we can't go to for obvious reasons, torture, physical abuse, and rape. There was even the killing of Manadel al-Jamadi, whose body was packed in ice and later photographed with soldiers posing beside it. The shock was immediate and worldwide, so the Bush administration answered quickly, saying that these were isolated acts by a few rogue soldiers. However, organizations like the Red Cross, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch said the opposite, claiming this was part of a larger pattern across U.S. prisons in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Guantanamo. The Red Cross also reported that most Abu Ghraib detainees were civilians with no connection to armed groups. Then, internal documents showed how they were given approval for what were called enhanced interrogation techniques. These documents would be later known as the torture memos, for reasons you can imagine. They argued that the Geneva Conventions didn't apply overseas and didn't classify the detainees as prisoners of war, which allowed them to hold people longer without charges and deny them the rights normally given to prisoners of war. Other orders showed Lieutenant General Ricardo Sanchez authorizing the use of dogs, extreme heat and cold, reversed sleep cycles, and sensory deprivation. Inside the cells, prisoners were stripped naked and forced into humiliating poses, threatened with dogs, beaten, shackled in painful positions, deprived of sleep and warmth, and forced into sexual acts. Taguba recorded one prisoner sodomized with a chemical light. Detainees spoke of acid poured on their skin, being dragged by ropes tied to their genitals, and being mocked. Manadel al-Jamadi, whose death was ruled a homicide, never led to any criminal charges. At the same time, 36 detainees died in insurgent mortar attacks on the prison, which critics said violated the Geneva rule that prisoners should not be kept in active combat zones. In 2006, the Supreme Court ruled that the Geneva Conventions did apply, and 17 soldiers and officers were removed, while 11 were court-martialed. The punishments varied. One guy got 10 years, some 3, and others shorter sentences, or even just reprimands or demotions. External contractors, such as the company CACI Premier Technology, also came under scrutiny. Pretty recently, in 2024, a jury found them liable for conspiring with military police to soften up prisoners through abuse, awarding 3 former detainees $42 million in damages. Jurors concluded that CACI interrogators facilitated mistreatment even if they did not personally carry it out. Operation Speedy Express. This was one of the most brutal and controversial U.S. campaigns of the Vietnam War. You can get an idea of what really happened when you hear that the Army reported about 11,000 enemy killed, but recovered only 750 weapons from the dead. Operation Speedy Express, carried out from December 1968 to May 1969, and run under Major General Julian Ewell, had the official goal of destroying Viet Cong bases, cutting supply lines, and re-establishing U.S. control over a region considered a stronghold of the Viet Cong, the Mekong Delta. On paper, the operation looked like an overwhelming success, considering that just 242 American soldiers died, while the enemy lost 11,000. With a ratio of 45-1, it looked like a decisive victory, but the numbers hid something darker. The fact that only about 750 weapons were recovered means that thousands of those killed were probably unarmed civilians. The Army's own Inspector General later estimated that between 5,000 and 7,000 civilians were killed during the operation. The campaign relied on overwhelming firepower, like helicopter gunships, artillery barrages, and fighter bomber strikes in a heavily crowded region with civilians. This basically turned entire areas into free fire zones. David Hackworth, a highly decorated battalion commander, admitted openly, "A lot of innocent Vietnamese civilians got slaughtered because of the Yule Hunt drive to have the highest body count in the land." Survivors and witnesses described whole villages wiped out, with civilians getting shot from the air as they tried to run. A Viet Cong commander later explained, "Most of the people killed were civilians, because civilians would run. We soldiers held our positions." Reports of atrocities began to surface in 1969, but they were overshadowed by the My Lai massacre, which we've just talked about. In 1972, Newsweek published an investigation by Kevin Buckley and Alexander Shimkin called Pacification's Deadly Price. They had interviewed villagers and studied hospital records. In one provincial hospital, they found that 3/4 of the civilian wounds treated came from U.S. firepower, not Viet Cong attacks. Their conclusion was that thousands of civilians had been killed during Speedy Express. No Gun Ri Massacre. In the summer of 1950, during the Korean War, one of its darkest tragedies took place at a railway bridge near the village of No Gun Ri. U.S. commanders were afraid that North Korean soldiers were disguising themselves as civilians, so they ordered refugee movements to be blocked. Declassified documents later showed that some commands actually went even further, authorizing troops to fire on groups of civilians who approached. Then, disaster struck. As waves of refugees fled south from the advancing North Korean army, they reached U.S. lines. There, they were stopped, searched, and grouped near the railway tracks by no-gun Re. American planes then shot at them. Survivors say ground troops soon opened fire too, driving them into the culverts and pinning them down in the bridge underpasses. Hundreds of South Korean refugees, mostly women, children, and the elderly, were caught under fire, and for 3 days, families screamed as they piled bodies on top of one another for cover, drank from a stream turned red with blood, and watched children die beside them. The death toll has long been debated, with survivors speaking of about 400 people killed, and U.S. veterans giving numbers ranging from dozens to several hundred. A South Korean government inquiry was able to confirm 163 people dead or missing by name, along with 55 wounded, and concluded that the real toll was likely much higher, around 250 to 300. Nearly half of the confirmed victims were children. For decades, the story was silenced, as survivors lived in fear under South Korea's authoritarian governments. It was not until 1999 that the Associated Press exposed the story worldwide, interviewing survivors and U.S. veterans. The reporting won a Pulitzer Prize and forced both the U.S. and South Korean governments to investigate. The U.S. Army's 2001 report admitted that civilians had been killed by American air and ground fire, but claimed there had been no orders to deliberately massacre them. It described the killings as a tragic accident of war. President Bill Clinton expressed deep regret and admitted things happened which were wrong. Instead of compensation, the U.S. funded a memorial and scholarships, which survivors rejected. South Korean investigators, however, concluded that there had almost certainly been orders to fire, pointing to missing records, consistent testimony, and orders from the time to treat refugees as enemy agents. Later, more declassified documents strengthened the case. One was a letter dated July 26, 1950, from the U.S. ambassador in Seoul, reporting that the U.S. military had adopted a policy of shooting refugee groups approaching its lines. This and other incriminating records had been deliberately left out of the Army's official report. No Gun Re also set off wider investigations in South Korea, uncovering more than 200 other cases of alleged U.S. killings of civilians in the early years of the war, including refugee bombings and mass executions. Sand Creek Massacre. On November 29, 1864, troops under Colonel John Chivington rode toward a Native American camp of the Cheyenne and Arapaho people. Chief Black Kettle had moved his people there after being told it was safe, and he raised a U.S. flag with a white flag underneath it to show peace. Many of the warriors were away, and most of the people in camp were too old or too young to fight. Despite this, Chivington's soldiers attacked. Witnesses later described women and children being shot at close range, people cut apart with knives, babies killed, and bodies mutilated for trophies. One account told of a child wandering in the sand, while soldiers took turns trying to shoot him. Another described fingers and ears cut off for jewelry, and the body of Chief White Antelope butchered. By the time the killing ended, most of the dead were women and children. Chivington claimed that 500 to 600 warriors were killed, boasting about the number, but other sources said the real number was closer to 150, with about 2/3 women and children. The soldiers suffered far fewer losses. Before leaving, they looted the lodges and returned to kill some of the wounded. The reason why this massacre happened in the first place is even sadder. In the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty, the U.S. recognized a large Cheyenne and Arapaho homeland. But after the Colorado Gold Rush and new migration, they asked the natives for more land than was agreed, and a small group of chiefs signed the Fort Wise Treaty, ceding most of the land to appease the U.S. Many Cheyenne, though, rejected it as invalid, and tensions rose. The governor told friendly Indians to gather near forts in order to stay safe, and Colonel Chivington himself, while he declared openly that he had come to kill Indians, told those seeking peace to come under military protection at Fort Lyon. That's exactly what Black Kettle did, following his instructions, but his people were pushed out. He still believed the U.S. and white flags would protect them, but the massacre happened. In Colorado and Washington, the story was first reported as a victory, but the truth quickly surfaced. 3 investigations followed, including a congressional inquiry that called it a foul and dastardly massacre. Officers and scouts testified about the killings and mutilations. Captain Soule, who had refused to fire, gave evidence and was murdered shortly after in Denver. Despite the findings, no one was court-martialed. Chivington had already resigned, and while his career ended in disgrace, he avoided legal punishment. A later treaty at the Little Arkansas promised survivors land access and reparations, but those promises were soon broken and replaced with much smaller reservations. Philippines concentration camps. During the Philippine-American War, concentration camps were used in Batangas, and one American officer described them as some suburb of hell. You'll soon understand why. Back then, General James Franklin Bell took command of U.S. forces in that area, and his goal was to starve the rebels and cut them off from any support. However, since there were many civilians there, they decided to put them into heavily guarded camps, as their homes, fields, and animals were destroyed. All civilians were required to carry identification papers, and anyone found outside the camps without them could be shot on the spot. Bell himself himself said neutrality should not be tolerated, which meant that everyone was either an enemy or a friend, and anyone accused of helping the rebels risked execution. Conditions inside the camps were catastrophic. People were packed together in crowded spaces with poor sanitation, which made diseases spread quickly. Cholera, smallpox, beriberi, and even bubonic plague killed thousands. Food was also scarce, and some soldiers described groups of men being forced to dig their own graves before being executed, with the excuse that keeping them alive would take food away from U.S. troops. Torture was also performed, such as waterboarding. The death toll was incredible. Between January and April 1902, 8,350 people died in the camps. In some camps, as many as 1 out of every 5 prisoners died. To calm public anger in the United States, the Army's top public relations officer tried to defend the camps. He claimed they were meant to protect friendly natives, feed them, and teach them better hygiene. However, this claim collapsed when reports from inside the camp surfaced, with letters from soldiers and witnesses. Wounded Knee Massacre. Before sunrise at Wounded Knee Creek, cavalry surrounded the Native American band of Lakota and began collecting their guns. Tension grew as soldiers searched the people, and a deaf Lakota man named Black Coyote held onto his rifle, and during a struggle, it went off. In that instant, soldiers opened fire on the entire camp, even though most Lakota men had already been disarmed. The Army's Hotchkiss guns fired into the tents where women and children were hiding. In less than an hour, more than 250 Lakota were killed or fatally wounded. 25 U.S. soldiers were also killed. Survivors tried to flee, but they were chased and shot, and some soldiers finished off the wounded where they lay. A blizzard followed the massacre, and 3 days later, civilians gathered the frozen bodies and placed them in a mass grave. 4 infants were found alive, still wrapped in their mother's shawls. The Army removed Colonel Forsyth, who had led the operation, but later reinstated him. An inquiry criticized his tactics, but did not blame him. 19 medals of honor were then awarded for Wounded Knee. Native leaders and many others have condemned those awards for decades, but most recently, in 2025, the Defense Secretary announced the medals would not be revoked. If you want to discuss this video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord.
Working across teams is tough, but Asana helps you handle it. Asana AI can spot roadblocks and assign work to keep everything on track. That's how work gets handled. Visit us at asana.com.
These are the 7 most powerful men in China. They represent the top leadership positions of the ruling party, and their identities are revealed every 5 years at a carefully choreographed political event called the National Congress.
China's Communist Party unveils its new leadership over the next 5 years.
The order of appearance is symbolic. The first person to emerge is the head of the party for the next 5 years. At the most recent event in October 2022, that person was Xi Jinping, China's president for the last 10 years, who walked out in the top spot a historic 3rd time after getting rid of China's presidential term limit that restricted all his predecessors to 2 terms. A signal that he may be planning to stay in power for life. The world hasn't seen a Chinese leader like this since Mao Zedong, the revolutionary founder of the People's Republic of China, whose ruthless dictatorship scarred the Chinese people for generations. Xi has been compared to Mao a lot, and he clearly draws from Mao's playbook. But there's something else that connects these two. When Xi was just a young boy, Mao ruined his life. Generations apart, their paths crossed unexpectedly, and a teenage Xi from an elite family in Beijing ended up in exile, condemned to hard labor in the countryside. 50 years later, Xi is one of the most powerful political figures in the world and the only leader since Mao to have unchecked power over China. So, how did he go from being banished in his country to taking complete control of it? Xi Jinping's connection to Mao formed long before Xi was even born. It goes back to when a bloody civil war was raging in China. A group of radical communist revolutionaries, including Mao, gained influence over large swaths of mainland China and controlled a communist military called the Red Army that fought the Nationalist Party ruling the Republic of China at the time. At this point, the communists were losing bad. The bulk of their army was pinned down here, in a communist-controlled region originally established by Mao, now surrounded by nationalist forces. And they were running low on food. So the Red Army decided to launch a bold attack to break through the nationalist forces and evacuate the roughly 130,000 communist soldiers and civilians stuck here. On October 16, 1934, they made their move and attacked a weaker part of the enemy line. They broke through, and even though their numbers quickly dropped, with thousands dying and thousands more fleeing to the countryside, around 86,000 stuck together and pushed on. This was the beginning of a year-long historic retreat called the Long March, the journey to establish a new communist base far from the nationalist forces. Mao, who used to be a military leader, wasn't in charge at this time. He'd insisted on using guerrilla tactics, which had heavily influenced the Red Army earlier in the war, but that approach had fallen out of favor and he was demoted. The Long March changed that. After escaping the siege here, the Red Army continued to suffer relentless attacks by the pursuing nationalist army. The military leaders of the march had pushed for a more traditional wartime strategy of direct confrontation rather than Mao's guerrilla tactics. And the result was catastrophic for the Red Army. Less than half of the original escape group survived the first 3 months alone. So it was at this first stopping point where Communist Party leader Zhou Enlai handed military leadership back to Mao. And Mao picked an endpoint for the march. Here, 800 miles away in rural northern China. But they didn't go straight for it. Mao led the Red Army deep into the mountains, where he predicted lighter resistance. And he was right. But the journey was still brutal. It was 9 more months of non-stop marching and fighting along this several thousand-mile route, before they ultimately arrived in northern China, where a guerrilla base led by a communist revolutionary named Shi Zhongshun offered Mao's army refuge, bringing the Long March to an end. That man was Xi Jinping's father.
What's up, everyone? It's Avery Johnson, QB1, and the number one thing for me on my recovery days is my sunscreen from CVS. Whether it's at the Bill or on the lake, I will see you soon. So what sunscreen are you picking up at CVS?
In the end, fewer than 8,000 of the original marchers survived. Even though thousands died on the Long March from starvation, fighting, and disease, Mao's leadership was credited with saving the Red Army from total annihilation, and he became the de facto head of the party as well as the military, entrusted with rebuilding the army to take on the nationalist forces for total control of China.
Wherever and however the Red troops move into battle, they spread the glory of Mao Zedong.
This is a good stopping point in the story to talk about how power in the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, works. Officially, the highest level of authority is a group called the Central Committee, and is responsible for all of the party's major policy decisions. Within the Central Committee is a select group of officials called the Political Bureau, or Politburo. In most communist parties, like that of the former Soviet Union, the Politburo represents the most powerful members of the party besides the General Secretary. But the Chinese Communist Party has a key distinction that makes it unique. It has one more, even smaller selection of top officials who ultimately had the final say, an elite class of Politburo members called the Politburo Standing Committee. This group, which includes the General Secretary, holds supreme control over the Central Committee, dictates the will of the party, and is in full control of the Central Military Commission, which oversees China's defense. Mao's promotion during the Long March landed him here, in the highest position of the military and the Politburo Standing Committee. Even though he was considered the de facto head of the party when the Long March ended in 1935, he officially became head of the party in 1943. With both the party and the military under his control, Mao began to exploit the system to ensure he remained at the top for the rest of his life. At Mao's first National Congress as the official party leader in 1945, the party introduced a resolution that brought his influence to a whole new level. It unified the party around a single understanding of its history and declared Mao's political ideology, later called Mao Zedong thought, or Maoism, as the unquestioned guiding principle of the Chinese Communist Party. Basically, Mao's ideas or policy decisions could no longer be challenged by anyone. It was here he unveiled his equivalent at the time of the Politburo Standing Committee, the 4 other top party leaders, all long marchers deeply loyal to Mao, like Liu Shaoqi and Zhou Enlai, who would go on to hold some of the most powerful positions in the future government. 4 years later, Mao declared final victory for the communists in the decades-long Chinese Civil War and established a new country, the People's Republic of China, or PRC.
Mao Zedong, once a lowly party worker,
now assumed the stature of the dominant figure in all of Eastern Asia.
But winning a revolution isn't the same as running a country.
Because now that you're running a country, there's all these other things you have to do, like deliver the mail and like build a dam and stuff like that. You can't possibly have the party do all these things.
So the party set up a government that would take the policy decisions made by the Politburo Standing Committee and figure out a way to make them a reality.
And so it evolved to a system where the party would make all the important decisions, and especially the Politburo Standing Committee. Then, as it is today, many of these decisions would go to the State Council. So the State Council is the highest decision-making body on the state side, led by the Premier of China.
The Premier of China, by the way, is almost always a member of the Politburo Standing Committee. One way Mao kept a tight grip on power over the years was by promoting those loyal to him to top positions in the party and government, whether they had government experience or not. For example, Zhou Enlai, the former party leader who helped Mao rise to power during the Long March, became China's first premier.
The advantage of that is that they could never challenge him. The disadvantage of that is they didn't know what they were doing, and so administration suffered, policy outcomes suffered.
Long March survivors often became party elites under Mao. Xi Jinping's father, for example, was appointed Secretary General of the State Council. And as the son of a Long Marcher, young Xi was given the informal title of princeling. Mao succeeded in never giving up his power during his lifetime. His unchecked policies resulted in massive famines and widespread persecution that cost between 40 and 80 million lives over a span of decades, and culminated in the disastrous Cultural Revolution, a violent final attempt from Mao to consolidate his power and force loyalty to the practice of Maoism. The idea was to make himself and his ideas eternal, the way he viewed communist figureheads like Lenin and Marx before him. Anyone that didn't fall in line with Mao's ideology was publicly humiliated, impoverished, excluded from society, and in many cases, executed, either at the hands of the army or by a militant youth group obsessed with enforcing Maoism, the Red Guards. Even those closest to the dictator weren't safe from his purges during the Cultural Revolution. High-level officials, including members of the Politburo Standing Committee and Long Marchers, were removed from their positions. Liu Shaoqi was denounced as a traitor and died while imprisoned under harsh conditions. Mao also removed the chief of staff of the army and replaced him with a Maoist, leaving no one left to oppose him in the military. Mao's handpicked successor, who always appeared loyally by his side in photos and propaganda posters, died under mysterious circumstances when his plane crashed as he was fleeing to the Soviet Union. Mao later denounced him as a traitor. He denounced Xi's father, too. This is a photo of Xi Sr. being restrained and publicly criticized by the Red Guards at the height of the Cultural Revolution. He would remain a prisoner in Beijing for 8 years following this. With his father purged, Xi Jinping, 15 at the time, was expelled from his elite school in Beijing and sent to work in the countryside.
He had to live in a cave and, do hard manual labor. His food was barely enough for, a growing young person. And Chairman Mao was responsible for all of it.
But then, Mao died. The Cultural Revolution ended. His successor was Deng Xiaoping, one of the Politburo Standing Committee members who was removed from power during the Cultural Revolution, who, just before Mao died, started making a promise to fellow exiled party veterans.
Deng Xiaoping signaled credibly to all the surviving Long Marchers that he wanted to rehabilitate people. So when Mao died, they all supported the rehabilitation of Deng. And as soon as Deng was rehabilitated, he went ahead and rehabilitated all these people.
With experienced leadership back in place, the party needed to figure out how to prevent something like this from ever happening again. In order to undo Mao's cult of personality, the party introduced a second historical resolution in 1981. It condemned periods of Mao's rule and emphasized a renewed commitment to collective leadership, vowing to oppose the consolidation of power around one person moving forward.
The successors to Mao didn't want a dictatorship. So they divided up these positions and put them in the hands of different people.
Like Mao, Deng kept tight control over the Central Military Commission as its chairman, and held a leadership position in the government, but was never head of state. He never held the highest position in the party either. Instead, he set up a new advisory commission and served as its chairman, which allowed him to influence the party's direction without positioning himself directly on top of it. This allowed a power-sharing structure while still making Deng the de facto leader of China until he stepped down in 1989, following the army's massacre of students protesting in Tiananmen Square.
A protester suddenly ran into the middle of the street and in front of the oncoming tanks.
Anger at Deng Xiaoping, the entire Chinese government, it had the real feeling of rebellion in the streets of Beijing.
People want to fight the military out of their city.
Deng and his ideology, which moved away from Maoism, set a precedent of sharing power. He opened up China and established economic ties with these countries, and was the first PRC leader to visit the U.S. in 1979.
Today we take another step in the historic normalization of relations which we have begun this year.
Deng's reforms became the foundation for decades of economic prosperity that led China to having the world's second largest economy over time and being on the verge of becoming the world's next superpower.
Communism is creating a consumer society.
It also reminds you that the standard of living in China is going up.
Here, capitalism rules.
Turn your expenses into 4% in rewards with the Verizon Visa Card. Each time you shop at the grocery store, get gas and dine out. Plus, your rewards can be applied toward your Verizon bill or on brand new tech. Apply today.
One thing power sharing did lead to was a lot of policy innovation and then some degree of decentralization, and both of these things helped China's economy enormously.
Which is why this period of economic growth and reform, stretching over roughly 30 years, is known as the Deng era. And whether he wanted to or not, Deng kept his word and never tried to consolidate absolute power around himself.
He did end up sharing power, and that set the stage for power sharing in the party until the rise of Xi Jinping.
So what was Xi doing all this time? When Mao died in 1976, Xi was back in Beijing studying communist philosophy. Even though the Chinese Communist Party had ruined Xi's family, he had joined it, just as the Cultural Revolution was winding down. But why?
Personally, he might begrudge Chairman Mao for doing all these terrible things to his family, but I think at this time he also recognized that in the system of the Chinese Communist Party, power is everything. Without power, you're nothing.
But in order to get that power, Xi did something unexpected. He left Beijing.
As his competitors were fiercely competing with each other in the 1980s and 1990s, he sort of got out of their way and went to the provinces.
He took positions in party leadership in rural, poor provinces all around China, where there were no other princelings to compete with. First in Hebei, a poor rural province outside of Beijing, where he easily reached the top spot as party secretary. Then in Fujian, a heavily militarized region where top members of the army were stationed. He moved up the ranks to party secretary here too, before becoming the governor of the province a few years later. After making powerful friends in the military, Xi went here, where he once again assumed the office of party secretary and grew his support on the civilian side. This strategy of moving around didn't just give Xi a leg up in areas where competition was slim, it also gave him credibility as a humble, hardworking party leader, and he cultivated a growing group of supporters who would come back into play years down the line. It was his last stop, and his shortest one, that ultimately got him back to Beijing. A brief stint in the top party spot in Shanghai in 2007, where he rehabilitated the city's image following a high-level corruption scandal. Xi developed a reputation here as a prudent leader who towed the party line. Just 7 months later, he finally returned to Beijing, having been promoted to the all-powerful Politburo Standing Committee.
Basically, the people who were deciding on top leadership at the time, they wanted a princeling, but they didn't want a princeling who was too ambitious or too strong. So Xi Jinping, he was seen as less ambitious because he was willing to go to the countryside and work in lower level positions.
When Xi emerged at the 2007 National Congress and leadership unveiling, he was one of the 9 most powerful men in the country. It was at this moment that his strategic climb, over 17 long years in the countryside, paid off, big time. When the General Secretary stepped down in 2012, Xi emerged at the top spot in the party as China's leader. Now, the elite son of a former revolutionary, turned exiled peasant, turned party darling, was poised to seize control of everything. Like Mao, Xi Jinping believes that rallying around a single figure is crucial to the party's survival, rather than the collective leadership Deng's reforms had normalized. So pretty much as soon as Xi Jinping came to power, he started getting rid of people.
The news 4 top officials removed for taking bribes was announced on state TV.
Xi Jinping has just sacked his foreign minister, just sacked his defense minister. He's sacked a whole lot of other people at the top of the military establishment.
The former security czar has not been seen in public for more than a year. The investigation against Xu allows the Chinese president to remove those opposed to his reforms.
He launched a major anti-corruption campaign as soon as he took power in late 2012, early 13, which led to the arrest of hundreds of senior level officials, as well as military officers.
These purges targeted Xi's rivals in the party, whose vacant positions he filled with his own supporters.
After this massive purge, Xi Jinping was in very tight control over both the party and also the Chinese military, thereby making him the most powerful leader of the Chinese Communist Party since the death of Mao.
That pattern continued in the second term, where he unveiled 5 new faces of the Politburo Standing Committee,
right here,
3 of them with close personal ties to Xi.
There should be a win right
In 2021,
here,
Xi pulled off one of his
does.
most dramatic acts yet, to enforce his influence over the Chinese Communist Party. He introduced a 3rd historic resolution that unified the party's ideology around one clear line of thinking: Xi Jinping thought. Xi's personal political ideology would now be the core in the party's thinking, political stance, and action. Basically, Xi Jinping's ideas could no longer be challenged, and they weren't for many years. During Xi's first 10 years in power, the size of China's economy more than doubled. So did average individual income. So did military spending. Under his leadership, China's presence on the world stage has grown too, positioning the rising superpower to take on the role of an aggressor externally, reasserting claims over parts of the South China Sea, intimidating Taiwan and Tibet, and stripping democratic process in Hong Kong. Inside its own borders, strict internet censorship and surveillance are widespread. And oppression of Uyghurs, a mostly minority Muslim ethnic group, is marked by human rights abuses. But it wasn't until COVID that Xi saw the first real challenge to his authority.
Anger in China is growing.
Video showing protesters in Xinjiang fed up with China's zero COVID rules.
The boldest public challenge yet for leader Xi Jinping.
With these protests all around the country and the party's reputation in peril, Xi reversed the failed policy, but is now faced with a shaky economy and cracks in his unchecked authority. It was just weeks before the widespread protests at the 20th National Congress in 2022 that Xi walked out in the leading position a 3rd time. He had already locked in the presidency for another 5 years and unveiled a Politburo Standing Committee completely packed with those loyal to him, after removing the final senior members of the party that had ties to his predecessor. Now, there is no one left in party or military leadership whose ideology differs from Xi.
I don't think anyone can push him out at this point. I think he will be the most powerful leader in China as long as he's alive and conscious.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Atlas. So many teammates worked on this piece. A small army of editors, animators, and researchers helped bring
could save him generating a debt. Why in the name of sweet holy hell is Michael Wolff, who then bled and died for the very... I will try to address who gets missed up, or can fund their own work. sure as sugar. $100 million. All intelligence. Dan. No more secrets. The Americans are lacking in intelligence. We now have reliable, direct evidence connecting Donald Trump to Epstein's underage sex. What's the connection? I won't spoil the surprise. Trump's DOJ cover-up of the Epstein crimes must not continue. This, right here, is what some might refer to as a hoax. A cover-up. There's been a botched delivery, that for sure is sugar. The Justice Department must release every piece of the Epstein files. The only time I'll ever agree with Dan. No more secrets. The American people, the survivors, and the victims deserve the truth. He's this man. Watch this. I'll pause it periodically.
Hey there, everybody. Big day in Washington, D.C., and I want to focus on the Epstein files because there was some significant news. And
by the way, this is like Better Call Saul dollar store version.
It wasn't just that finally, after 50 days, Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva was sworn in and became the 218th signature and final signature on the discharge petition to force the Department of Justice to turn over all of the Epstein files. The bigger news, in my view, is the release of emails that relate directly to Donald Trump's knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's underage sex trafficking ring. The big one to me is an email in 2011 from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell, saying that Donald Trump has surprisingly been quiet, but that he was with one of the victims for hours. Now, the reason why this one is so important.
It's so important, they, and as far as I understand, the Democrats, redacted the name of the victim. It's so important, and it was especially important that they redact the name so that nobody could know who it was until unmasked.
Is Donald Trump was not running for president. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't getting asked about Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form. And he was communicating in private with his co-conspirator. These type of
He was communicating in private with his co-conspirator. Let those lies sink in for a second.
Co-conspirator statements are admissible in court. And the reason is that they are generally reliable. When you make incriminating statements to your co-conspirator.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's talking about Jeffrey Epstein making admissions to his co-conspirator about
I saw Dave Smith did a show with that Clint Russell guy this week, and he said, why doesn't Nick Fuentes take back all the horrible things he said, like about Hitler? And first of all, I don't think it's that horrible, actually. I don't know why you're all offended. I thought you're a comedian. I don't think it's that bad. That's number one. Number two, this is why. Why will I never apologize? Why will I never do that? Because when you are dealing with the Jewish mob, when you're dealing with these Jewish gangsters, they're never operating in good faith. Know that. Understand that. Bank that. When you're dealing with Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, Josh Hammer, these guys are gangsters. They're crooks. These guys are liars, and they are never operating in good faith. You think the Anti-Defamation League and the SPLC, you think these people operate in good faith? You think they're honest? You think they're looking for a sincere apology? They're not. They are looking for submission. They're looking for humiliation. Shapiro and the ADL and Mark Levin put the screws in anybody that is critical or contrary to the Jews in Israel. They destroy your reputation. They lie about you. They make things up. They try to hurt your career any way they can. And they do this not because they want you to see it their way, not because they want a sincere apology. They want you to bow down. They want you to submit and surrender. They want you to acknowledge that they are in charge of you. They are our moral betters. They are the boss, and we are supposed to defer to them and kowtow and kiss the boot. That's what that's about. That's what they did to Kyrie Irving. That's what they did to Ye. That's what they did to Mel Gibson. That's what they do to everybody. Give us $1 million to the ADL, and we want an apology and a book report from the Holocaust Museum. This is why I will never apologize. This is why you should never apologize. Because these people hate you.
Oh, all right, he resigned.
They hate you. They don't care about
I wanted to get a goddamn checkmate.
They're not looking for an apology. They're looking for submission. And I will not give that to them. I would rather die. And that's the difference. Kevin Roberts gave them an apology. And look at what an idiot he looks like. Everybody, look at the clown. Look at the absolute fool, Kevin Roberts. Look at how he humiliated himself like a bitch. Go and watch his apology video. Watch it on repeat. Look at how this old, bald, white man got on a camera and groveled like an imbecile. The false humility, the shrugging. He goes, I own up to it. I made a mistake. I said venomous coalition. That's an anti-Semitic trope. I need to be better. And they didn't accept the apology. It wasn't good enough. He's been doing that for a week. For a week. He was on a Zoom call with the board on Monday. He was in an all-staff meeting, which got leaked to the whole internet earlier in the week. He has been doing that little routine for an entire week. Embarrassing himself. And look at where that got him. Did they accept the apology? No. Did they relent? No. Is his job safe? No. None of them are letting up. People are resigning. People are leaking communications. He is still being attacked. He's getting read the riot act by foreigners and his own staff. Everybody look at Kevin Roberts, the week's idiot. This is the idiot of the week. And you should be embarrassed. You should feel like a cuck. You should feel like a bitch that you did that. This is why we never apologize. This is why we never play these games. Because we are in a war. We are not on the same side. Do not kid yourself. These people that put Israel first, they are deadly serious. They keep the frame. They're not friendly. They're not mirroring your body language. They're not mirroring your language. They're not trying to appeal to you. They're not trying to meet you where you are. They're not empathetic or sympathetic. Yoram Mazzoni flew to D.C. to be the probation officer because you committed the great crime of not condemning a vile anti-Semite. These people are not our friends. They're not our allies. We cannot work with them. If you're an Israel first, psycho, lunatic Jew that is hysterical and paranoid, you think you're living in the Fourth Reich, you are not friends with us. You're not America first. You're not even Christian. So we're not on the same team. We're actually set against each other. And when you're set against an enemy, and they know exactly what they're about, and they're serious, and they're fighting you, and they're trying to defeat or submit you, you don't apologize to people like that. You don't show them that your hand is empty. You don't show them that you're unarmed so that they can cut you and stab you. You don't say, hi, Ben Shapiro, I'm sorry. All you're going to get is cut. All you're going to get is stabbed. Metaphorically speaking, when he tried to embrace an enemy like that. And that's exactly what happened here. So let this be a lesson. For all those people that think this is a great big misunderstanding, for all these people that think we can deal in good faith with these people, with these psycho Zionists, Israel First lobby, you think it's just a matter of, if only I apologize for all the truly bad things I said, we could get this whole thing straightened out. Let Kevin Roberts be the example. This is what happens. You act in good faith, you apologize, you show how weak you are, you submit, you get punished, you get slapped. They hold your head up by your hair like a scalp, a defeated enemy, and they say, look at our prison bitch. Look at what we made Kevin Roberts do. Does he have kids? If he was my dad, I would be mortified. And we need to start thinking like this. What do your own people think of you? If I ever worked for this guy, if I was this guy's kids, I would be mortified. If Kevin Roberts was my dad, I would disown him. A disgrace. You are a disgrace. You are a disgrace to our country. You are a disgrace to Christians. You are a disgrace to your family. You are an embarrassment. Look at what you did. You sold out your friend Tucker Carlson. You sold out your country. You apologized to keep your job. And in the end, they didn't even accept it. They got what they wanted. And now look at yourself. And that video that you made, that apology, you can never undo that. You can never take that back. It's up there on the internet where it will live forever. Hope you're happy with yourself, pussy. And by the way, you want to understand my appeal? Why am I winning the youth? Because of cucks like you. Because of weak, feckless, idiot boomers like you. You want to know where the anger comes from the young people? It's from seeing the older generations. It's from seeing white men, white boomers like you and Eric Erickson and Matt Walsh and all of you crawl on your bellies like worms for these foreign interlopers. For the feminists, for Israel First, for the Jewish lobby, for all of it. And we're sick of it. It's your job actually to lead. It's your job to protect us. It's actually your job to be a custodian and a vanguard for our civilization, and you let us all down. Look at Ben Shapiro. He's fighting for his people. Look at Josh Hammer. He's fighting for his people. They might be ugly, they might be fat and physically weak, but they're keeping the frame. They're not suckers. We are a bunch of suckers. White people, Christians, are a bunch of suckers. These people are eating our lunch, and they're not playing games. They're deadly serious. They know what they're about. Josh Hammer says Europeans have Jew hatred in their DNA. Is anybody calling for him to be canceled? No. Are the Jewish lobby, are they calling for him to make a good faith apology for the fucked up things he said? No. They circle the wagons around their own because they know the goal is to make Israel and the Jewish nation as strong as possible, and they're all on the same page. Whereas our leaders, our elders, the whites, the Christians, the Americans, they're out there begging for forgiveness, getting lectured by people like Megyn Kelly, getting lectured by the women. The women are empathetic, so they fall for this. Oh, should you really said it that way? Oh, the language. Oh, my goodness. And the men are more feminine than the women. Kevin Roberts gets up and says, I should have never said venomous coalition. You pathetic dog. What a joke. What a pathetic excuse for a movement we have. I didn't even intend to get all fired up like this, but somebody needs to say it. Because that apology, the reason it makes me
Did y'all see this happen?
Myself this entire week is because he didn't say anything wrong.
I agree with this nigga right here.
His first instinct was to defend Tucker, his friend, because Tucker did nothing wrong. Maybe I've done things wrong, whatever. Tucker didn't. I've done nothing wrong either, I think. But Kevin Roberts defended his friend and said it's America first, Christ first, and he's apologizing for that. And people are going to do, well, he's doing what he needs to do. Well, he's got to do that. No, he doesn't. This is why we lose always. This is why our whole race and our religion and our civilization has been eating shit. Because in the face of the foreign hordes, in the face of the black insurrection, in the face of the out-of-control women, in the face of the Jewish lobby, all the older generations can do is yield and vacillate and defer and submit. And a younger generation gets up and says, we will not tolerate this. We won't take it anymore. We're not going to be tone policed. We're not going to be guilt-tripped, emotionally blackmailed. We're not going to be suckered into apologizing to people that hate us. And what do they want to do? They say, I'm the problem. I'm misleading the young men. They say, Nick is messing with the young men. He's taking advantage of disillusioned young men. I'm leading them. If there were leaders, there'd be no need for me. You're not a leader. That's the difference. Leaders are supposed to be strong. You're weak. That's the difference. They say, he's taking advantage of disillusioned, disaffected, lost young men. No, I'm leading them. I'm standing up to the bullies. I'm standing up to the Jewish lobby that fucking hates them and wants them to die in Iran right now. Where were you? You got 40 years on me, and you've been on this planet 20, 30, 40 years longer than me. Where were you? I'm the dad that stepped up. I'm the leader that reluctantly stepped up. And because I'm the only one, apparently, that sees through this and is willing to be called a monster, I guess. And have everybody, nitpick everything I say all the time. This isn't a game. This is a coordinated attack. That's what this is. How many hit pieces this week? Okay. From the New York Times, from the Atlantic, from, I think, Wired did one, or one of these magazines. From the American Mind at Claremont. Claremont, blow it up your ass. Harry Jaffa is dead.
It's not what I meant to do, but fuck it.
Grave. Leo Strauss is dead. And I'm smarter than him. Leo Strauss and Harry Jaffa are dead. And Claremont can go fuck itself. American Mind did a big piece about me. David Reboy did a piece. National Conservative did a piece. The Blaze did a piece. All the conservative magazines had something to say. Salem Radio had something to say. Mark Levin, all the shows, all had something to say. It's a coordinated attack. They are trying to snuff out and suppress criticism of Israel. Dinesh D'Souza, who was glazing me in June, has been working overtime this week.
Let's go, bitch.
Working overtime on Twitter.
This should be the dub right here.
Seems like a nice guy. Never forget who these people really are.
This should be the dub right here, please.
Nice enough. He's on Twitter attacking us all week.
Just make your move.
It's a coordinated attack to snuff out any criticism of Israel. And you know what's amazing? Brett Cooper entered into the fray talking about Randy Fine. And she said Randy Fine would be happier in Israel, which is objectively true. And then they unload on Brett Cooper. Have you ever seen anything like this? Did you see this? So Brett Cooper used to work at Daily Wire. Her contract expired. I think it was not under the best circumstances. I think it was a little contentious. She left Daily Wire earlier in the year. And then she went on YouTube.
What a weirdo.
And as far as I know, nobody really had a problem with her.
She had no choice, so I was going to have to checkmate. That's so fucked up.
Even at Daily Wire, publicly, it was a amicable send-off. It wasn't a big, ugly crash out like with Candace Owens where there was a lot of public acrimony. It was relatively amicable and professional. And Brett Cooper, ever since, has been doing her thing. She's been doing her YouTube videos, which are not really my cup of tea. It's a lot of, like, celebrity drama, which is maybe appealing for a female audience. I don't love it. But by all appearances, she's not the worst. She's not the worst commentator. Her takes are not... It's not the worst thing that's out there as far as e-girls and conservatives are concerned. That is until this week. So she's doing her thing, going along, singing a song. This week, she does a video and she weighs in on all this controversy and she talks about Randy Fine. And Randy Fine wants everybody to be canceled. Randy Fine says Tucker is not MAGA. Nobody's MAGA except for Israel. And Brett Cooper says, you know what, Randy Fine, I think he'd be happier in Israel. And oh boy, did she do it when she said that. The clip went viral. Everybody was talking about it. It blew up. It got millions of impressions. She said, Randy Fine, you'd be happier in Israel. Ooh, you're not allowed to talk like that. And then almost immediately, at the same time that that video goes out, I start to see a clip about how Brett Cooper, when she was interviewed by Sean Ryan, I guess she said that years ago, her and her mother saw a clairvoyant or a medium, a fortune teller. And Brett Cooper claims that she communed with her dead brother through this medium. All of a sudden, I'm seeing this clip everywhere on Twitter. Oh, Brett Cooper practices witchcraft. She's evil. She's a pagan. Is this normal? And this is the anatomy of a political attack. Now do you get it? Nobody had a problem with Brett Cooper. Nobody. Nobody had a problem with her all year until she criticized Randy Fine. And how did she criticize Randy Fine? She said, I think he's loyal to Israel. Well, he is, by his own admission. He would say that loudly and proudly at the Republican Jewish Coalition this weekend. But if Brett Cooper says it in a standoffish way, you know, man, you'd be happier in Israel.
I've been stuck in this like 250 area, bro. Fuck, road to 400.
Vile anti-Semitism.
I was so close to 300.
Noxious, monstrous, truly disgusting stuff. You know this way they all talk? Really noxious stuff. Really nasty stuff. This is how they talk. So once you say that, all bets are off, and then they go into the file. They open up the filing cabinet, they pull the Brett Cooper file, and they go,
rip, chat,
here's a clip where she said something.
All right, yo, like, subscribe, peace.